You're waiting on a train.
A train that'll take you far away.
You know where you hope this train will take you, but you can't know for sure.
Yet it doesn't matter! Now tell me why!
Because the show's canceled, dummy. Welcome to the golden age of television, where shows get canceled for no reason. Thank you for taking this show off your platform, HBO Max. Now everybody's gotta pay real money, unless they're a sailor of the seven seas. Infinity Train was a rad show. It's a show about kids who need to be taught a lesson, so they get on this train, let go of their toxic traits, and come back to society rehabilitated. Every train car has a different puzzle to solve, which will help them learn the lessons they need. It's kind of like video game levels. Each season of the show has a different cast of characters who go on an adventure together. While there is somewhat of an overarching story, it mostly relies on the individual character arcs of the main characters of each season. So, why am I talking about it today? Because it's interesting. For those of you who haven't seen the show yet, I will explain the specifics as we go on, but for now I'll talk about the show in very broad terms. Infinity Train revels in charm from beginning to end. A lot of its premise is reliant on us getting invested in the journey of these characters, and that premise is executed excellently. What I really like about the show is how it portrays morality and personal growth. The show plays with its systems in interesting ways, but there's one season that really stands out from the others in terms of how it plays with the morality system. That's what I'm here to talk about today. I fell in love with the way that it subverted its morality system. In that season, the characters reject the default morality system, and the consequences drive the intrigue of the show. I thought it was fascinating, and I want to share that appreciation with you. As always, think of me more as one of the girls at the book club than some legendary arbiter of truth. I'm just sharing something I think is cool. In order to show you what I think is really cool about season 3 of Infinity Train, though, we have to take a look at the rest of the show. What is the formula that season 3 subverts?
I like trains.
Personal growth is the lifeblood of Infinity Train. Essentially, the train forces passengers to climb up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, for those of you who never took Psych 101, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a motivational theory that ascribes all of our motivations to a set of needs. The lowest needs on the hierarchy are necessary for survival, where the higher you get, the more they focus on living a fulfilled life. While I'm not entirely sure that Infinity Train was designed to be a journey up the hierarchy of needs, the shoe fits, albeit not always perfectly. Often, you'll find that self-help is essentially just this, but organized differently. It makes sense then that a train that helps people sort through their problems would reflect the hierarchy as well. Okay, so let's explore how the train helps people climb the pyramid. Assumably, physiological needs are met automatically by the train. We don't see a lot of eating, but we do see that food, sleep, and water are rarely problems on the train. The rest of the needs are met by going on the journey through the train. We're gonna go through the 3 journeys of the characters in seasons 1, 2, and 4 to find the common elements and get a sense of how the journey is supposed to go. The train starts by picking up a passenger. Passengers aren't just picked at random though. The train specifically picks them up at times of personal crisis. First, we have Tulip, who's disappointed to find out that the miscommunication caused by her parents' recent divorce means that she can't go to coding camp, so she runs away. Next, we have Jesse, who participated in bullying his brother so that he could receive acceptance. Lastly, we have the duo, Ryan and Min, whose desires come into conflict after going on separate paths, in spite of their plans to tour in a band together. When the passengers go through their portal, they start out in an unconscious state. The train assigns them a number related to the amount of growth that they need to go through. Tulip is chronologically the first passenger on the train, and she comes at a time when things are slightly dysfunctional. When she arrives, she sees a number on her hand and doesn't know what it does. She meets 1-1, who indicates that her number is counting down toward her death.
When it reaches 0,
You're gone forever!
While 1-1 is technically correct, gone forever just means back home. Shortly after that, though, 1-1 is proven unreliable.
If I put this donut hat on my head, will I die?
sure, why not?
For the first season, we're allowed to revel in the mystery of what the number does, but in later seasons, the number is explained to the passengers pretty quickly after their arrival. Every train car has a puzzle that teaches the passengers a lesson on their growth journey. Often, the train cars put passengers in unsafe situations. In some ways, the train is counterproductive in ascending the hierarchy of needs. However, instead of giving the passengers an unequivocally safe experience, the train forces them to develop competence by developing skills and abilities. It's important to note that we have some inherent misunderstandings about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The pyramid was actually not designed by Maslow. It was actually designed by marketers who I hate with every fiber of my being. Yeah, don't think I'm down with every pyramid that's ever existed. The problem with the pyramid is that it indicates that these are levels like a video game. Once you overcome one level, you can focus on the next level. In reality, the levels are pretty fluid. You can need to address several needs at once. Getting to a higher level on the pyramid does not guarantee that the needs below will disappear. Generally, the lower level needs are more pressing to solve if you're missing them though. Each passenger also meets a denizen that will join them on their journey. Denizens are non-human creatures that will appear on the train. While some of the denizens are tied to specific train cars and the puzzles on them, each passenger also travels with a cohort of denizens. This cohort will address specific deficiencies in the passengers. Tulip struggles with accepting her circumstances, so she's paired up with One-One, who is an intensely distractible airhead, and Atticus, a corgi who proudly preaches and practices the value of living in the moment.
You suggest we sleep on things a lot.
I am a dog.
Jesse is a people pleaser, so he gets paired up with Lake, who is a little rough around the edges and doesn't like him at first, as well as Alan Dracula, an indifferent deer. Alan Dracula doesn't help Jesse grow as much as he just vibes. Ryan and Min have grown apart due to their differences, so they're paired up with Kaz, who reflects their problems. She causes problems for other denizens while running away from her problems and never apologizes. Through the denizens, the passengers learn about themselves in addition to finding love and belonging. The bond between the passengers and their denizen becomes a beautiful friendship. The denizens and the passengers help each other grow. With that foundation, all that's left is self-esteem and self-actualization. I'm not going to get into the nuances of when the passenger reaches each of these individually. Just know that we're kind of talking about both. These are addressing the problems that brought the passengers onto the train. That's where we get into the numbers on the passengers' hands. When the passengers arrive and figure out that they need to lower their number, they get right to work on the task. For the first little bit though, their efforts don't succeed. They try to do the activities on the train car without learning anything. Tulip tries to speedrun each cart and systematizes lowering her number. This method takes advantage of her natural strengths of being a diligent worker and being intelligent. Her weaknesses of failing to enjoy the journey of life and trying to control her circumstances make her unable to progress. Since Lake spent some time with Tulip, she feels like she perfectly understands the number system. Jesse takes instructions from Lake uncritically, trying to please her instead of working on the train's challenges in a way that works for him. His tendencies as a people pleaser keep him from growing. After a moment of bonding, Ryan and Min's numbers go down. Ryan happens to learn a lesson, so Min starts to believe that Ryan is the one who needs to grow.
You're the one who was meant to be on the train, not me.
This pulls them further apart since Min starts to treat Ryan in an especially smug way. The only way forward for the passengers is for them to let go of their preconceived notions of what they need to do and engage uncritically with the process of growth. Instead of engaging with the train on a meta level, they instead need to engage with the train on the most direct of terms in order to grow. There's something really profound about this idea. In a sense, it's the familiar adage that life is about the journey, not the destination. It's more than that, though. Instead of trying to fit our lives into a certain mold, the show suggests that we should commit to the process of growth. Through that growth, we will be better aligned with who we want to be. After going through this process, learning competence, gaining community, and overcoming their flaws, the door opens and the passengers are finally allowed to go home. The open door marks the point of self-actualization in the passengers. Interestingly though, every time that the passenger's door opens, they reject it. One of the common criticisms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that self-actualization is too much of a self-oriented goal. My belief, and the show's indication, is that self-actualization cannot occur without a deep love for the people around us. We are social beings, and by our very nature, a truly fulfilled person will be the sort of person who looks out for the needs of others. When Tulip's door opens up, Atticus is turned into a Gome, and Tulip rejects her door to rescue him. You can see this with all the other characters too. Jesse tries to bring Lake back with him, but since she doesn't have a number, she can't come along. Jesse tries to return, but is unable to. However, this causes him distress, which reopens the portal to the train so that he can negotiate with the conductor. Most interesting here is Ryan and Min. Min gets stuck in a train car, and Ryan promises that he won't leave him. This is the lesson that Ryan needed to learn. Don't abandon your friend in his time of need. Since he learned the lesson, his door becomes available. Ryan has a choice at this point. Does he take the door and break his promise, or does he reject the door and keep his promise to stay with Min? Although the door is physically available to Ryan, he's unable to take it because to do so would be to reject the very lesson that opened it. Ryan's number returns and the door closes. He interprets this as an indictment of his character. The fact that he considered the door makes him unworthy of it. I see it differently though. It seems as if his choice to identify with Min's troubles made him take on Min's number as well. Min accepts himself enough to play in a band with Ryan, and as a result his door opens, but Ryan's doesn't this time. Only when Ryan finally learns that his mindset was not only hurting Min, but himself, does his door finally open. Only after the passengers take care of the needs of everyone in their party do they leave the train and return home changed. They fix their individual problems, but more importantly, they learn to value and respect the people around them. The distinction between a selfish self-actualization and an others-oriented self-actualization creates a narrative through line through the show. For instance, looking at the point about the failure to engage in the process, that's only part of the picture. Engagement with the process, by its very nature, means that we care about the people around us. Tulip starts her journey on the train with a complete disregard for the needs of the denizens. They make all sorts of requests and she rejects them all.
Mash with us.
Nope, no time.
In a desperate chase to lower her number, Tulip shuts every one of them down until she is forced to engage. The more that Tulip engages with the process, the more she grows and her number lowers. At the same time, she complains less about being forced to engage with the needs of others, to the point where she engages with a silly, frivolous train car with no issue. That, to me, is the mark of a self-actualized person. Someone who is thoroughly engaged with the present. They engage with others and let the people in their periphery change them for the better. To be involved with the community and to be entirely present while engaging with others is the process of growth. You should be looking for ways to grow, but you won't find answers if you aren't genuinely engaging with others.
Hey!
Infinity Train Season 2 goes through great pains to show that the denizens have souls. Although there's really no way to prove that they have souls diegetically, based on what we see in Season 2, it's hard to argue that they don't. Where in most of the seasons, the focus of the series is on the passenger, Season 2 is actually told from the perspective of Lake, who is a denizen created from the reflection of Tulip. The season is centered around her trying to get a number so that she can escape the train. Ultimately, Jessie and Lake use some trickery so that she can get a number and escape the train. I think this is as close to a diegetic answer as we can get about whether denizens have a soul. Lake is able to leave the train and thus proves that she's able to exist without it. That makes the Apex the perfect antagonist to show up at the end of Season 2. The Apex are a group of rogue troublemakers led by Grace and Simon. While Grace and Simon are both young, probably in their teens, most of the Apex consists of younger children. When we first see them, they ruin a train car for Jessie and Lake. Then they take them to their base and try to indoctrinate Jessie to get him to turn against Lake. Their entire ideology stands against Lake's goal of self-actualizing and finding her value. They refer to denizens as gnolls, referencing the fact that they have no number.
No, it means nothing. Not even a zero.
They encourage Jessie to abandon Lake in favor of joining them. Standing up to the Apex is what actually causes Jessie's door to initially open. We aren't here to talk about the Apex in Season 2, though. While they do make for an interesting antagonist, the show doesn't have room to fully explore their ideology. In Season 3, though, the Apex are the protagonists. I must say, the change in perspective is electrifying. What I love about the Apex is that their worldview is shaped by a lot of data. It's coherent. It has answers for just about everything. In spite of that, it's not true, though. This is so cool to me. The Infinity Train's fictional system of morality has a false ideology built around it. You can see how it came to be and why the Apex created and then fell for it. When I started watching Season 3, I barely remembered the Apex. It had been 2 years since I had watched Season 2. The season starts with the main character, Grace, getting ready and then meeting with the Apex for a raid. As they get ready, a song about empathy plays.
I look at you, I see me.
Without knowing the context, I saw this song as a celebration of these characters. They're a diverse group who take care of each other, cooperate together, and seem to have a strong sense of community. Then we quickly find out that they're there to raid a train car, and the people singing are the ones that they're attacking. You don't get any less subtle than attacking a train car full of people singing about empathy. So that's what the Apex do. Instead of genuinely engaging with the puzzles in a train car, they loot it. The mall that they've made their base is filled with loot that they got from other train cars. As they raid the cars, their numbers go up. You might think that would hint to them that what they're doing is wrong, but the opposite is actually the case. They are actually excited to get their numbers up. They believe that numbers are an indication of power. More than that, they talk in fear about how when a passenger's number goes down, they disappear.
Kids have been disappearing when their numbers go down.
I find this so interesting. The original system designed by the train is working against itself. Humans love big numbers and get addicted to them. The train has made doing evil addictive. The high number is considered a reward, and they have a fear of the number going down that's associated with death. This ideology has a philosophy of life and death. It almost sounds like a religion. Okay, yeah, the Apex is actually a religion. They have theology. Literal theology. And their myths are based on misinterpretations of true events. Something that I have yet to talk about up to this point is the conductor. In season 1, the conductor is an imposter, Amelia. Amelia was a passenger who took over the train. Her goal, instead of lowering her number, was to bring her dead boyfriend back to life. She travels the train in a robotic machine that she salvaged from different elements of the train. Grace was rescued by Amelia in her robotic suit. Since Amelia was the conductor at the time, Grace almost sees her as the god of the train. At the end of the first season, the crew defeated Amelia, and 1-1 took control of the train. Now, imagine if you didn't know that 1-1 was the original conductor and almost worshipped Amelia's robot as your god. This would seem like the rise of a false god. And that's exactly how the Apex refers to 1-1.
And if he wasn't imprisoned by the false conductor 1-1, he would eat you alive!
The Apex see 1-1 as an evil and hostile god. Grace and Simon are in a sense priests of the true conductor. Grace stands as the leader, with Simon as her second in command. Grace, as a leader, takes her religion quite seriously. Simon is on an entirely different level, though. He seems to be more of a fundamentalist than Grace, and upholds their dogmas with the utmost of importance. The rest of the Apex could be considered the congregation of their church. Simon's fundamentalism and hatred for 1-1 cause him to catastrophize situations on the train that he can't control. A harmless train car where all he has to do to pass it is dance is seen as a high-level threat.
This is what happens when we play by train rules.
An otherwise harmless cart is immediately cause for Simon to issue warnings to the rest of the crew.
Everyone, keep your bodies moving. Frostbite is just as deadly as lava moles or bottomless pits.
Other seasons also support the idea that the train has a sort of divine will. The denizens that are assigned to passengers seem designed to help them grow. Every train car's puzzles point toward the same goal. All of this suggests that the train has a sort of divine will that points the passengers towards self-actualization. This plays a part in the Apex religion as well. When something out of the ordinary happens, they blame 1-1.
I think the false conductor just made his first move.
Ritual is also a part of Apex culture. They have religious recitations where the leaders will begin the call and then the followers recite their portion.
Down with the false conductor! The Apex reveals the truth!
Protocols are memorized and recited for day-to-day wisdom.
When encountering a null that cannot be overwhelmed with force, the null in question must be incapacitated.
They all wear sine waves on their faces to indicate their allegiance to the Apex, as well as it being a form of worship for their god. Larger numbers represent not just power, but also a level of spirituality. The conductor that they worship had the highest number. Her number validates her status of power. As a result, hierarchy in the Apex is determined by who has the largest number. Grace has the highest number, so she's the leader. Train cars, then, are seen as gifts from the train. The Apex believe it is their right to take whatever they want from the train cars and bring it back to their main car. It's sort of a manifest destiny. Instead of engaging with the train cars, the Apex do everything in their power to subvert them. They have harpoon packs that allow them to travel outside the train. They also use them to go outside the normal boundaries of the interiors of the train cars. Again, it's a bit like speedrunning and going out of bounds. A lot of people accuse speedrunners of subverting the artistic intentions of the game that they're playing. They feel as though the game should be experienced normally. And I say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Do you think that speedrunners never did a normal playthrough of their game? For the Apex, though, that's exactly what they're doing. They do out-of-bounds glitches and whatever it takes to avoid the experience planned for them by the train. Denizens, or gnolls, are simply decorations on the train. None of them can be trusted. Some of them pose a threat. Since since the Apex doesn't consider them to have souls, they default to cruelty. The end of the Apex way of thinking is racism. This is the ultimate problem with the Apex ideology. A myriad of bad assumptions leads to evil. They created a system that rewards them for being awful. As they continue to do damage, they have no opportunity to change. Because they've constructed a worldview that's flawed, but incredibly coherent.
Gordon is the strongest, the most important, but he doesn't always listen to others.
In spite of all the resistance from the Apex, the Train still has a divine will. The Train has a critical problem to solve if the Apex will ever be redeemed. How can they grow when they subvert everything that the Train throws at them? That's why the ultimate solution is Hazel. Simon and Grace get separated from the Apex by way of the Train forcibly splitting them up. The first car they go into on their journey back has a passenger named Hazel. One merit to their worldview is that they genuinely do care about the child passengers in their care. They give Hazel the opportunity to join the Apex. There's a dark side to this benevolence though. Both Grace and Simon are incredibly manipulative. Although they want Hazel to join the Apex, they dangle the possibility in front of her to force her to submit.
Can I be in it?
Apex kids are all really special and really brave.
Hazel has a denizen companion named Tuba, who Simon and Grace desperately want to get rid of. Unfortunately for them, Hazel feels a strong attachment towards Tuba. They scheme to try and kill Tuba, but they'll need to do it in a way that doesn't turn Hazel against them. Hazel turns out to be the perfect companion to force Grace and Simon into the Train's plans for them. Hazel's starry-eyed wonder forces them to give up their usual strategy of subverting the Train's puzzles for them. They wouldn't want to scare her off immediately with their normal Apex cruelty, especially not with Tuba there. The Train's cars give Grace the opportunity to grow close to Hazel. As a result, she naturally develops some empathy for Tuba through Hazel. This empathy lowers her number. She freaks out. Her symbol of power is dwindling and she doesn't know why. Again, due to being forced to engage normally with the cars, Simon is forced to work with Tuba. This is the perfect opportunity for him to grow and change. It would seem that it works. Tuba and Simon cooperate, take advantage of each other's strengths, and even joke together.
Roy is at a 10. I need him to be at about a 6.
This could be the moment that Simon finally turns around. After, the train car is solved and they exit. Unfortunately, the cars separate and Tuba risks her life to get Hazel to Grace and Simon. She hangs on, and since Simon is the only one who can get to her with his harpoon pack, he moves over to rescue her. This is the moment where Simon can finally change and grow.
Teamwork begins with two people trusting each other.
Simon didn't really change, though. He stomps on Tuba's hand to kill her and turns her into an electric Mufasa.
You're no person.
You see, Simon had been so indoctrinated that although he had the opportunity to change, he refused it. If you'll notice, his number never shrank in the car while he was working with Tuba. I think the clear difference between him and Grace is their relationship to the Apex religion. For Grace, the Apex worldview was almost a pragmatic thing. Don't get me wrong, she still bought into it, but it was simply how she made sense of the world. More than that, her religion gave her control over others. Simon needed the Apex religion, though. His bond to it was forged by trauma. When he first got onto the train, his denizen accidentally left him to die. His hatred for denizens was not born of a natural inclination, but more out of a feeling of betrayal. Grace came just in time to rescue him. A simple misunderstanding became the basis of their entire worldview. Neither of them understood the numbers, so when Simon saw Grace's number, he asked how it got so big. That was the data they had to work with. Grace had a larger number and she was cool. The conductor had a huge number, and so he must be incredible. Grace enjoyed the power her beliefs gave her, but Simon needed them. He became a zealot. In a world that didn't make sense, this was the only thing he could cling on to. He was still a scared kid, but he developed a hard shell around his heart. This isn't just the critical turning point for Simon, though. Grace has a crucial moment in her moral journey as a result of the murder of Tuba. When Hazel finds out that Tuba died, she has a breakdown and starts to turn into a turtle. It draws into question what she is. Is she human or denizen? She has a number, but passengers are exclusively human. Grace has already developed a bond with Hazel, though. She can no longer see Hazel through the lens of her old ideology. Grace chooses to side with her empathy and hides Hazel's secret from Simon. While looking for the rest of the Apex, Grace and Simon come across Amelia. They've stumbled into their god in an innocuous way. When they see her massive number, they marvel, which Amelia takes offense to because she has a proper understanding of how the numbers work. At that point, they had no idea that their god was directly directly in front of them. When they finally explain their beliefs, Amelia laughs.
If anybody was a false conductor, it was yours truly.
She doesn't revel in her divine status. At that point, she's been thoroughly humbled, and her time as conductor is a matter of shame. Grace and Simon thought the old conductor cared about them, but she didn't even know who they were, nor did she remember saving Grace.
Do you remember saving a girl?
No.
Simon rejects Amelia as the god he worshipped. In a sense, she both is and is not that god. She was at the very least the inspiration, but they built her up to the point where she could never live up to that standard. Simon met his god and rejected her. His theology remained completely unchanged. Simon finds out that Hazel is secretly a denizen, and suddenly Grace has a choice to make. She acts as though she didn't know and treats Hazel with disgust.
I'll leave if I want to, no.
At that point, Grace has a problem. Her old sense of morality and the sense of morality that she is moving toward are diametrically opposed. In this middle zone, her actions are completely unethical to both systems of morality. After going to sleep and waking up in the morning, Grace acts as if she suddenly decided to accept Hazel into the Apex anyway.
We don't leave Apex behind. You're sticking with us.
Even still, Grace tries to move forward without picking a side. It doesn't work though. Simon's suspicions catch up to her, and Hazel's upset about how she was treated the night before. While Grace was asleep, Simon went through her memories and found out that she had been lying the whole time. He traps Grace in her own memories, ending in a loop of the moment of her betrayal. In this loop, Grace finally has to confront the fact that her old beliefs were wrong, and what she was doing was wrong.
You're wrong, Grace. Numbers, the conductor, denizens, everything.
When she has this realization, she's able to escape. Grace finally makes it back to the Apex. They treat her as hostile immediately. Clearly, Simon has turned them against her. Simon arrives with an unprecedented level of showmanship, not to mention a number that covers his entire body. When his god no longer serves him, it seems that the only way to remedy this is to become godlike. Simon and the Apex refer to Grace with a new term, void. While Simon refused to rework his worldview, he was quite willing to add to its dogmas.
What is a void?
A leader who is no longer fit to lead.
While Grace was trapped, Simon took the opportunity to further indoctrinate the Apex. He then commands the Apex to murder Grace. Grace has an ace up her sleeve though. She tells the Apex that they met the conductor and that she doesn't care about them. Simon insists that this is a lie, but it gives her the opportunity to escape. They get into a fight over the bridge. Simon nearly dies, but Grace saves his life. They come to a standstill.
Why did you?
I don't know.
This grace received from Grace is not reciprocated though. Simon swiftly tries to kill her again. He seems to succeed, and at that moment, a number covers his entire face. In the act of murder, Simon becomes the epitome of his worldview. There's no more room for him to display his power. This is negative self-actualization. When people talk about self-actualization as too much of a self-oriented thing, this is the worst case scenario. On the opposite end, we see what caring for others accomplishes. Denizens that Grace helped earlier return the favor and save her life. Meanwhile, Simon gets attacked out of nowhere by a Gome and brutally killed. Although at face value this seems like a random act of violence, I don't believe there are coincidences on the train. At the moment Simon became unredeemable, his fate was sealed. There's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads to death. Simon became the epitome of the Apex ideology, and for that idea to die, he had to die with it. The Apex worldview was based on real data. One might assume that meant that they had a good worldview, but their own biases and misunderstandings blinded them. It's quite tragic, really. Ideology is unavoidable. We need ideology to make sense of the world. Making the best out of a situation with limited information is the human story. At the same time, there's one critical piece of information that cannot be ignored. That is the value of other people. The Apex had all sorts of ideas about the nature of existence. Not all of their ideas were terrible, but without the understanding of the value of others, their moral system was evil. Simon started out feeling that the existence and happiness of Denizen was an injustice due to his trauma, but that hatred could not be contained until he killed his best friend. At that point, he had no regard for morality. He just wanted to be right. Simon, in some ways, was molded by unfortunate circumstances. A traumatized child who held on to the little pieces of information that made him feel safe. In a way, Grace is responsible. She led Simon down a dark road only to abandon him when Simon was already too far gone. Nonetheless, Simon, in a sense, still bears responsibility for all of the evil he committed. Probably the most interesting idea here is the role of the train's will in contrast with Simon's free will. It makes you question how much of the decision was his and how much wasn't. And assuming the train did its best with him and he was still lost, is that his fault? Is it someone else's? This was always the destination, and yet you feel like you have choices in the middle of it. Are your choices less yours just because you were always going to make them? In some ways, the train is a perfect analogy. The train has one destination. You cannot change that. While in motion, though, you have complete autonomy. Seen from the other side, though, it seems that there's nothing that the train could do. Simon was always going to make that choice. He was always going to die. You can fight it, but the choice he made is still his. Put like that, Simon seems to have a lot more agency. His decisions seem to have more weight, not less. And what is Grace's responsibility in the matter? Simon and Grace were both mistaken, but when the truth was laid bare, she was willing to grow and change. At that point, though, she was already on her way to true self-actualization. Should she not have changed him? A fully actualized person is fully present and invested in the needs of the people around them. Simon had some serious needs. Once Simon was too far gone, though, there was nothing she could do. You can't force someone to change. You can only show them what you've discovered of the truth. You're a guide rather than the solution. To try and force someone to change is to disrespect their autonomy and individuality. The reason setting yourself on fire to keep others warm doesn't work is because it denies their autonomy. Grace finally learns this lesson at the end of the show.
It's unfair for me to tell you how to understand yourself.
The lesson that she couldn't learn for Simon became the lesson that saved the Apex. Lies may be temporarily rewarding, but Infinity Train suggests that a dangerous worldview can only offer so much light. Eventually, you'll have to confront the truth, and if you aren't able to accept it, disaster waits at your door.
I don't know about that. I'm a train!
The nature of the train limits our ability to take its lessons at face value, but it allows us to take lessons nonetheless. The story of the Apex seems to poke a hole in the idea that morality is entirely subjective. The data we build our morality on can be misinterpreted. When we build our morality on bad assumptions, bad results follow. It's why we always have to be willing to grow and change. How can we know if our assumptions are wrong? I think it's clear that the quality of your morality is determined by how you treat others. If you, like Simon, are more concerned with what you perceive as truth rather than what actually is the truth, bad results will follow. If you're changing for the worse and care less about others, it indicates that you're running on bad assumptions. The best version of you is not determined by a large number. It's determined by the good you do for others. It seems that although the train offers the path to self-actualization, there needs to be some work on the part of the passenger. The journeys and pains may be what you need to grow, but if you reject the lesson, then the adventures the train has for you will only make you worse. The train was designed for passengers to fix their problems. For Grace and Simon, the train added to them. It was never too late for Grace. She just needed the perfect denizen to upend her worldview. A denizen that seemed to be a passenger. What I didn't mention before was that Hazel was a failed experiment by Amelia to bring her dead boyfriend back to life. She wasn't even supposed to be on the train technically, and yet the train used her as a conduit to change Grace. I think that's kind of cool. The divine will of the train took a mistake and used it for good. Hazel was the conduit for Grace to understand the denizens were people with value. When she fully engaged with the people around her, it changed her for the better. All the damage she did to her soul quickly turned around. To self-actualize is to care deeply about the needs of the people around you. Grace never entirely lost sight of that. She lost a lot of years destroying people's lives. Her ideology got in the way of her seeing reality. When the rubber met the road, though, she was willing to grow, and that made all the difference.